I'm Anita Letterman, and the country that I chose for my cultural resume is St. Kitts and Nevis Island. St. Kitts and Nevis are two Caribbean islands off the coast of the Atlantic, near the Dominican Republic. The two countries are commonly grouped together due to geographical proximity and shared history. St. Kitts and Nevis are known for being the first English colony in the Caribbean. The countries have a deep history with colonialism and the slave trade. Under British and French rule during the 17th and 18th centuries, the islands were among the wealthiest in the British Caribbean due to their prolific sugar plantations. Colonial influence explains why language, cultural traditions, and politics are similar to those of the United States. However, as an island country, there are stark differences in culture. St. Kitts and Nevis has a population of about 50,000 people, an almost 10% increase over the last 11 or so years. Mostly Black, African, or West Indian descendants make up the demographic. The official language of the country is English and local Creole. English-based Creole is heavily influenced by the languages of Garifuna and West Africans, brought to the Caribbean by the slave trade. Most of the economic industry is based on exports, export-oriented manufacturing, and sugarcane, for example. Agriculture and cattle exporting are also main facets of the culture's economy. Now we see that the culture's economy is primarily sustained by tourism, as it makes up 60% of the GPD. The adult per capita income, or the average income per adult in the country, is about $39,000. This average is similar to the USA's per capita income of about $43,000 according to the most recent census. The most common religions are Christianity and Protestant and Anglican denominations. This is a direct influence of the British colonial rule, and religion, along with the traditional African beliefs, impact the education systems and values found on the country. The government is a parliamentary democracy, another similarity to the U.S., although there is only one legislative house acting as the National Assembly. The current head of government is Prime Minister Terence Drew. The most common holidays celebrated in the country are Carnival, where clowns, moko jumbies, and masquerades are present. Culturama celebrates cultural heritage and is a part of the series of celebrations held throughout the Caribbean every year during July and August. The Emancipation Day on August 1st celebrates the British abolitionist movement have been pushing for the Caribbean to be freed since the abolition in Africa and other slave trading nations in the early 1800s. But it wasn't until the Christmas Slave Rebellion of 1831 in Jamaica that this emancipation was deemed possible. Enslaved workers in Jamaica believed that emancipation had come, but the planters were withholding it from them. The British feared that a violent uprising and another Haitian revolution was coming, so an act to abolish slavery was put in place on August 1st, 1834. This act classified all former enslaved workers as either agricultural workers or domestic servants. Every year, the day is commemorated to reflect upon the island's rich cultural heritage. Initially, it was a serious event held in memoriam, but has evolved into joyous celebration proudly highlighting traditional expressions of music, movement, and art. Food in this country is influenced by other Caribbean islands, along with colonization, indigenous, and African influences. Seafood such as lobster, conch, and maui are also common. Some signature dishes include saltfish and Johnny cakes. And Johnny cakes are named after indigenous Shawnee soldiers who came back from World War I and showed others how to make bread without an oven. This recipe made its way to the island off the Atlantic coast. This is an example of food established under the cultural forces of war, like hardtack or spam. Originally, it was made with limited ingredients and born from innovation from scarcity. The original recipe includes cornmeal, but now it is typically made with flour and on a stovetop. Goat water is a goat stew that is also part of other Caribbean island cultures and a cook-up is a one-pot dish made with chicken, rice, spices, and veggies. It's known to be a gathering dish, a dish that promotes community through the nourishment of a large amount of food. People usually live in towns and villages ranging from 20 to a few hundred residents in size. Within these communities is a matriarchal society, where women are business owners and homemakers. More mature, older women are deemed to have more authority in the society. However, modesty and conservatism connected to religious ideology and gender roles plays a big part. We can see in men culture in the Caribbean how gender roles favor men's rights and privileges. But with changing statehood independence and women's access to education, a more equal playing field is being built in the country. Women are expected to be modest, provide financially, and rear children. Men, however, are more socially allowed to go out in clubs, while women who go out are seen as less respectable. The small population on the island results in a tight-knit social group, allowing for information to travel fast and through the community. It is known that men are typically more romantically forward, and accepting an invitation to be walked is perceived as a courting ritual. With high and encouraged tourism rates, these rules can be bent for foreigners, but it is important to be knowledgeable of pre-existing social etiquettes. The country aims to supply children with the necessities they need for a safe, balanced life. Education is highly encouraged by the government, as St. Kitts and Nevis was the first country in the Caribbean to introduce a universal secondary education in 1968, which paved the way for the country to achieve a 98% literacy rate. Systems of providing food at schools are also in place, as well as health care for children under 18 and those above 62 years of age for free. After the sugar and cotton production ceased around the 1950s, many citizens emigrated. Jobs shifted to agriculture and manual labor. These were pushed as a means to provide financially. Now, more white-collar industries, tourism services, schools, and healthcare facilities are among the jobs available on the island. For recreation, Kittians and Nevians enjoy the typical day-to-day activities most of us participate in. But due to their geographical location, activities include the natural world and sea more often. Activities such as snorkeling and sailing and fishing, botanical garden visits, sea turtle conservation and observation, and going to bars and restaurants where food and community are intersecting facets of culture. These activities are also recommended by the Nevis native Ignacio Otley, who has worked at the Nevis Four Seasons Resort for over 20 years. Citizens also like to play sports like soccer and netball. The communication style in this country is described as indirect yet direct, where most indirect communications come when expressing negative sentiments. Directness depends on an individual's comfort and familiarity with another. There are subtle messages people of this culture use to avoid confrontation, as they prioritize politeness over everything. Face-to-face communication and eye contact is preferred, as it builds trust. It is also rude to say just hi or hello. Good morning, night, or afternoon is preferred. This country also has a unique sense and view of time. Caribbean time as described as at least half an hour to an hour later than the actual intended event. This is the model of time the people of this culture use when communicating with another. Even though women do so much work, there are still patriarchal structures in place, such as wage gaps and limited positions of women in politics. Author Nikia Homer writes in references at an event highlighting the work done by women like political ambassador Thelma Phillip Brown, that behind every strong woman is a story that gave her no other choice. 5 out of the 14 ambassadors representing the Caribbean community member states are women, as are the 50% of ambassadors representing St. Kitts overall. Gender-based violence and wage gaps are still present in work culture. So are racial stereotypes. that are either perpetuated by the white population or internalized from the African and indigenous population. Philip Brown herself has mentioned the underlying racism that can be felt as an African descendant. But efforts have been made to combat stereotypes and discrimination in the country. Is the culture masculine or feminine? St. Kitts and Nevis is a matriarchal society in terms of familial care, financial responsibility, and the tending to foundations at home. According to the World Bank Gender Data Portal, data shows that there are more themes of slightly more stable wage employment found amongst women in the Caribbean culture. Is the culture individualistic or collectivistic? Great importance is placed upon the role one has within their family. Family is considered before making big choices. The cultural value is held in the strength of one's family and community. This is significantly different than the individualistic culture of the United States. Is the culture past, present, or future-oriented? Despite the Slavery Abolition Act passed in 1834, discriminatory social restrictions were still enforced based on race. Apprenticeship after slavery removed the authoritative ownership between an enslaved person and their enslaver, but the emancipation threatened the economic and social structure of the colonial Caribbean. Those previously enslaved acknowledged that there was more work to be done to achieve true equality. For years, citizens of the island country worked against racial prejudice, labor oppression, and de facto segregation. Statehood, the independence from British colonial forces, finally became a reality in 1983. This gave rights to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis over their own government. The responsibility for both internal and foreign affairs was placed in the hands of citizens of the state and their representatives. The country has always had to look forward for progress. Interesting facts about this country include that St. Kitts and Nevis is the smallest independent sovereign nation in the Western Hemisphere. The islands are only about 2 miles apart from each other, while St. Kitts is 68 square miles. Nevis is only 36 square miles. Nevis also derives its name from Christopher Columbus's observation of its cloudy peaks atop the Nevis Mountains. And volcanic black sand beaches are among the many sights to be seen in this country. In conclusion, this federation and country, comprised of 2 independent islands, is unique in structure, history, and culture. It is a country rich in heritage and pride. For people who have hardily survived through slavery and governmental dependence, the value of traditional culture is evident in the livelihood of its citizens. This is something that can be felt from miles away. And if you ever do visit the country, don't be afraid to say more than hello.